Okay, so hello everyone. Today is Thursday, August the 3rd, and we are continuing in our uh, exciting book study uh, of the book Flight, a quantum fiction novel. And yours had a lady on front, but mine has a window.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so very interesting. Okay, so I can start us off in prayer if you like.
Okay.
As we stand here, honoring our source, the essence of our entire being, of the entire world, we understand that as we have this opportunity to gather together to enjoy the creative fiction of a book, our understandings of how other minds think and how it helps us to grow and understand aspects of our own life and that of our own worlds. But as we continue in this book Flight, let's just release at this moment all things that have come prior to this moment and all things that come later on today, and let's just enjoy this moment of sharing with one another and with the author of this book and their creative endeavors. And with that we say, and so it is.
And so it is.
Hey Sakina.
Hi. Thanks for waiting a little bit for me.
You're quite welcome. Can you hang around a little bit after it's all over with? Because I was looking at the front of my book, and there, if you haven't gotten one yet, I saw a way that you can get one. I'm not exactly sure. Yeah, I think it's directly from the publisher.
Okay.
If you want. Okay. What I'm going to do before we get into our reading tonight, I just want to refresh our memories, and for anybody that might be joining us or listening in later, the main characters in this book. Mendel J. Orion is a writer, and he is the protagonist of this novel. Aria Flight is the protagonist in Mendel's novel. Jorian, when you hear that name, I kind of consider him Aria's soulmate, very close friend. And Laptor and Geristar, or Laptor and Geristar, I got the impression last week when we were reading that they were figments of Mendel's imagination. And it turns out that they are, because in the reading last week, he was just imagining where he was going to go next with his writing. And when we get into it today, and this is where we start with Mendel writing about these two individuals. Yes. Juristic nodded slowly and deliberately. He extended his hand to Liptor's shoulder and patted it resolutely. Yes, he repeated, still nodding omnisciently. And that is what Mendel has just written on his computer as a part of his continuing work on his novel. And now we go back to Mendel and what he's doing otherwise. Mendel wanted to drink. No, he didn't want to drink. The thought just came into his mind that the bottle would provide warmth and a certain cessation, a certain oblivion. On one hand, it went against him to diminish his senses, his ability to observe. On the other hand, a little alcohol opened blockades, numbed only the pain, diminished only the obstacles. Glancing at the clock, Mendel realized he had been writing nearly 5 hours. He pushed the chair back from his desk, interlocked his fingers over his head, and stretched his arms upward. You're losing a grip on reality. The memory of Sandra's voice admonished him. At least stay sober long enough to know what's real. She's the one who has a problem with reality, he defended, wishing he had never allowed her into his life. Thank you, she would say when he told her she was beautiful. I know I am, her smug look would finish. Maybe it wasn't fair, he thought, now that he had waited to end it, waited until he could look at her and not want her physically. He used to purposefully look at Sandra Wilford to see if his body reaction matched his personal opinion about her. It didn't at first, but he would inevitably silence his personal dislike, even question his awareness and listen to his body. Didn't I have a little frog in my throat? Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, we can
Yes.
hear you fine. Yes.
Okay. He played with it for a while, a test, an experiment, finding it fascinating the way his body and thoughts didn't always match. After a while, they did. After a while, her soul was what he saw. There was no desire for that, and his body finally agreed. Yet he didn't find it fair that he left her only after his body was sated, that he didn't sooner take control, that it was only after the physical desire had been indulged and spent that he ended the relationship. He had been hopeful, though. Mendel defended his sense of honor. He had tried to like Sandra, hoped to reach her, to free her. It wasn't that his body had simply had its way and was finished. At the time, he didn't know the drill himself. It only became apparent through the experience. He remembered his warning, his pleading. He wasn't the man on the cover of Women's Magazine. Sandra continued to think and speak in slogans. How to keep your man, what men want, how to get your way with your man. Sandra, just talk to me, he had said innumerable times. He was forced to conclude the woman could not be direct. She could only happen on an angle. She could only scheme, not propose or suggest. Soon, Sandra Wilford became evident. That's all, Mendel concluded. Anew, he had seen her soul. That did it. Her peerless soul, he didn't care how shapely her legs were, how tightly pumped her muscles were, how sleek and shiny and sweet smelling her dark hair was. Not anymore. Anyway, his conscience tweaked. Okay. He came to terms with it. How did one learn if not from experience? Been there, done that. Mendel yawned. A nap, that's what I need. In his bedroom, with a practice push to the back of each shoe, with his opposite foot, he slipped each one off without untying the laces. Ah, the softness of the quilted bedspread pressing against his face felt good to him. He relinquished the weight of his body to the comfort of the mattress and surrendered the weight of his thoughts to the comfort of sleep. Any comments at this point?
No.
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. Chapter 3. The phone rang. The fluctuating tone penetrated Mendel Orion's sleep. Each ring becoming more distant from dream, pulling him back into the room. Hazily confirming that it was the phone he was hearing, Mendel almost decided to ignore the sound. When it rang insistently and his answering machine didn't activate, concern for lost opportunity motivated him to reach for the receiver on his nightstand. Hello. Congratulations, Mendel. He recognized the perky voice on the other end, Sandra Wilford. Even over the phone, her presence demanded attention. The chipperness sounded inflated and was too snappy for one awakening from sleep. That's what I got for being curious, Mendel admonished himself. I said, congratulations. His reply was slow. For what? Best New Science Fiction Writer of the Year, John Campbell Award. Oh, that. In the silence that followed, Mendel knew Sandra was wondering if he was drunk. I was taking a nap, he said begrudgingly, the feeling that he had to explain. Sure, Sandra sidestepped as if she had not even wondered. You knew about the award, I mean, didn't you? Of course you knew. As usual, she didn't wait for a reply. How were you feeling? She didn't speak to the other question. Are you still getting drunk? Do you still have trouble discerning fact from fiction? Mendel was tired. He could have said something slick, but he wasn't interested anymore. He didn't want to fight her. He just wanted her to go away. He answered her question, fine. How's the new book coming? Getting there. Oh, good. Okay, Sandra, thanks for calling. I have to get back to work now. I thought you were sleeping. I was, but Mendel, she purred. Mendel, I realize it doesn't matter anymore, but I was wondering, do you think the problem between us might have been caused by your getting too involved with your characters? She still hadn't heard him. He had explained what his problems were with her, and they had nothing to do with anyone else, real or imaginary. Mendel let her go on. He didn't want to repeat himself. He had to cut it off somewhere, draw the line between what he had failed to say and what she would never hear. I mean, the way you were talking about a fictional character, one would think you were going to meet and have lunch, she laughed. I did yesterday. Silence. He could feel the density of her seriousness. She was questioning his faculty. Finally, she laughed. For a minute, you had me worried. Mendel didn't answer. You know, seriously, my analyst is really good if you ever want to see him. It really might help. Thank you, Sandra. Arrest never hurt anybody, you know. Sure, go lie down and quit being vital. Disagreement sparked in Mendel, but he didn't voice it. He said, I'll let you know what I decide. Maybe I'll see you at the convention, Sandra blurted quickly, assuring him, just friends. Okay, thanks. He started to set the phone down, quickly brought the mouthpiece close again and said, bye, then replaced the receiver in its cradle. Rolling over on his back, he thought with satisfaction, it worked. He had dodged her, managed not to get snagged. She had rolled off him. He wasn't even doubting his own sanity. Not too much. A moment's inventory told him he wouldn't be able to fall back asleep. He lifted himself to a sitting position, meeting his reflection in the dresser mirror across the room. His sandy brown hair was tousled. Haunted, as usual, was his impression. He leaned forward and rubbed his face, lingering particularly on the eyes, feeling the stretch along his back as he straightened his head and sat up. His thoughts gravitated toward his new novel. An uninvited taunt of Sandra's entered his mind. Of course she's perfect. That's in your head. You can dream her up any way you want her. Mendel dismissed the prattle, brushing off this abuse of his heroine, Area Flight. He continued groping for words as he slid his legs over the side of the bed. After a moment, he got up and began to amble around the house, preparing for his rendezvous. He looked forward to writing about her. It felt like being with her. The character is my dream girl in a way, he supposed. But isn't she, after all, more real than certain facts? How many facts are actually true? Mendel reflected on such things as false facts. Embraced for centuries, some things turned out to be untrue, but they had been held as fact nonetheless. Who knows what facts are floating around here that we'll find out over a hoax? Oh, I'm sorry, let me read that again. Who knows what facts are floating around here that we'll find out were a hoax? He looked at the wall, silently challenged, and one day he might walk through it. Since he'd been writing about Area Flight's adventures in space, it became evident that he had dreamed about her all his life. He could chat, he could close his eyes, and she would appear. He could feel her. He could even hear her, pledging undying love. Undying love, he thought about it. How can love die? It didn't. He decided love does not die. Even before he had given her a name, she existed. She could feel him. He could feel her more than he could see her. He began to imagine what she would look like. Golden and soft with limpid eyes, her voice mellifluous, her hair whirlwind of sun. And then they kissed. It was more real than, well, any of the times his lips had touched Sandra Wilford's. Though Mendel Orion was willing to admit Area Flight was a fantasy, he could not let go of her. Maybe she was a dream, but even as such, she still existed. He was soon sitting at his computer. And before we get on with his writing, are there any comments at this point?
Well, I just think that it's kind of interesting that, he is still trying to break up with the girl, Sandra.
Yeah.
And he really, and although, he really hasn't broken up with her yet.
Right.
I think, not to the point where he wants to, because he doesn't seem like he wants any kind of communication. But
Right.
She hasn't broken up with him.
huh?
I said, I'm seeing it as he's broken up with her, but she's not taking the message that he's sending her. She
Yeah,
doesn't
but
want,
but if he
breaking up
told her
with him.
directly, I don't want to talk to you anymore, I think that would, he keep, although, I think he's still being nice. And at some point, he's gonna have to stop being nice to her. And I kind of can see that this might be something in the future, that if he doesn't really cut her off, that she's going to become more and more involved in his life, whether he wants her to or not.
Kind of like in, what's that movie where the girl became obsessed with, I can't even remember the actors. in the movie.
Uh-huh. Yeah, the Bunny in the Pat.
Nah, I can't remember the name of the movie.
Yeah, I
But
can't remember
anyway,
the name of the movie either, but I know which one you're talking about, with
Yeah.
Glenn Close and
yeah, Glenn Close was in it.
and Michael.
Fatal Attraction.
That's
Fatal,
it.
no, was that Fatal Attraction?
Yeah, Fatal Attraction. That's the
Yeah.
one I'm thinking.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, because sometimes, if you don't, if you don't set a boundary,
Mhm.
that other person will continue to
Harass you.
or just to stay within your range.
Find ways to do it without it seeming like they are.
Right, and sometimes I think that humans probably they just don't want to really face that that thing where you have to now be absolutely truthful, absolutely honest, and they will, they're waiting for the other person to take the hint. But why would the other person take the hint? The other person knows, like she says, it's just going to be friends, but she's not interested in just being his friend. So I can, it's going to be fascinating to see where if he doesn't, I think that if he doesn't get her out of his life, she's going to cause a problem somewhere down the road, because she's already offering him her therapy, her therapist, her analyst. She's already saying that he's too involved with his characters. She's congratulating him on his story, on that he got science fiction writer of the year. So so she's doing all of that. So maybe she's jealous
Yeah.
of
Could be.
who he is as a writer. She wants his position for herself. So if she can't have him, she'll have him any way that it comes. So it's kind of interesting where
Okay,
he sits with this person.
right. Well, did you have any comments, Sarkina?
No, I agree. And sometimes because of our upbringing, we've been taught to not hurt somebody's feelings. So therefore we kind of bury the truth in a sense, rather than saying to somebody, hey, look, I no longer want to be with you, or I no longer want you in my circle of friends. I don't mean to hurt you, but I'm just being blunt and honest with you. And because of our Christian background and puritanical ways, we're not very honest in regard to certain things. We try to be tactful, but I find that children who have who are autistic or have certain health challenges or mental challenges, they are more honest and they're very blunt, and they come right out with it. And we as parents sometimes say, oh, to the person that they've maybe said, oh, you're ugly, or I don't like you. Well, they don't have much tact, where in essence, they are really being truthful. And they really get the message across to the individual,
And I think children
So
before
I
the
think
age,
she needs him to be very blunt.
right. And I
to
think
get out
children
of,
before the age of 5 are also like that.
oh yeah, yeah. It's not until they're, the adults around them start brainwashing them. I hate to use that term, but that's, in truth, that's the best term I can think of, because,
Yeah.
we allow it without even realizing that we're allowing it. It just happens the way we're brought up. And, because as a child, we may say, something like, Mommy, that lady's fat, or Mommy, you're fat. or mommy, I don't like this. And, the parent will say, no, no, we don't talk that way. We don't say that. If you can't say something nice, then don't say anything at all.
Right,
So
yeah.
therefore, then we begin to bury our true feelings.
Mhm.
And
Right.
as we become adults, we're faced with the fact that we have to now kind of unbury everything that we've buried.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's kind of
Mhm.
what I see in this so far.
Okay,
So-
the rest, any other comments?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay, well, the rest of chapter 3 is Mendel writing on his computer. So this is all his writings from now until the end of chapter 3. For recreation, Arya sometimes tracked. She was good at it. Being an astute observer of nowness, Arya Flight was able to revive past experience recording and project them as vivid motion pictures that others could see. Her recreations were intense and polyview generated, unlike those of some which were limited to personal viewpoint. When Arya tracked, the views of all present were included, as well as her own, making her hologram accuracy. Oh, I'm sorry, making for hologram accuracy. She was running her memory strip of Galactron, projecting it into the atmosphere between herself and Onyx, who watched the flickering images which wrapped involvement. It was an award ceremony, and Onyx is her pet dragon.
Mhm.
Arya had discovered an entire populace on the outskirts of Teuton, which had been locked in energy and hidden behind black screens of 94 spirals. She had confronted the black, the unknown, the incomprehensible, to map out the maze of their entrapment and restore their freedom. Onyx had seen her sensor mate on that mission. Presented to Arya Flight, awards for power, to Deo, defense, discovery of route, to language, communication, understanding Kalis. There they were, surrounded by grateful beings who were now free to operate beyond energy, restored into exercising their own will, capable of creating their own laws. I was shimmering. Onyx admired the violets and blue-greens of her complexion. Sensing Onyx's pleasure, Arya slowed the projection of those moments, regrouping the molecules with particular attention to Onyx's angle. The tribunal was present. Sanriel, Riala, Talara, Rosen, Flozel, Juristic, Mitra, Blizia, all welcoming Arya to the tribunal ship and realizing her power to decide the course. They were all joyful. Just a second. Oh.
You know what? I'm gonna put on pause.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Let's see. The course, they were all joyful. Sheer happiness reigned. The heights of beauty radiated. Trust and camaraderie lived. This was the dignity of thought, beings at their most noble and natural. Arya was newer than the Supreme Tribunal in experience as a one, but whole, founded. Let me reread that. Arya was newer than the Supreme Tribunal in experience as a one, but whole, founded in a compassion rather, that was capable of giving life to an entire universe. She was a power, and Deo them all, pledging her full agreement and joining their allegiance to freedom of thought from the conquest. The picture dissolved. More, Onyx demanded. Arya had stopped tracking. She was not amused by it anymore. She focused on Onyx. I'm just going to be for a while, she expressed. It required concentrated attention to manifest herself and interact with the physical dimension set of laws, prerequisites necessary for tracking. Even light bodies required effort, less expenditure than denser forms. But it was work nevertheless, and sometimes Arya just wanted to enjoy nowness. She was about to settle to do so, to dissolve into non-form being, when an incomprehensible caught her attention. She thought, scanned space. What is that? Onyx felt it too. Unable to identify it, though no scanning. Unable to identify it through no scanning, Arya condensed herself and positioned herself at the Loyard's master controls. She depressed the circumference scanner. The device began feeding back frequencies received from its sensor vectors one by one. That's it. That one. Hold, fire, tune, screen, view, audio. Arya entered each command to zero in on it. A scintilla, minuscule against the void, appeared on the screen. What is it? Identify. No reference, the screen replied. Relocate, change vector for closer analysis, Arya maneuvered. But Loryard shifted direction. View, audio. The light could now be seen to be brilliant, but its rays were curious, unlike anything Arya had ever seen. Each flow of photon was interrupted. Each ray appeared to be spitting out fine streams of white light, which inverted into black and continued out of blackness instead of the center source. Identify, she commanded. Polarity, to terminal, the screen flashed. Is that all the information? Arya entered the command again. Identify, repeat detail. The screen flashed its output once more. Polarity, to terminal. Detail, Arya repeated her information request. The screen went red. Then, no reference. Danger, no reference. How strange. It was fascinating, yet Arya and Onyx were alone and being subject to laws of the dimension in which they were operating. Arya weighed the potential liabilities and decided against investigating. We'll record the location for future exploration. Onyx was relieved. Aria had learned to plan her vast spirit and impulses with reason. The last time she didn't consider potential consequences, they had ended up in a dimension particle warp, which took them what seemed like a void to finally escape. Relocate, resume vector, home base original, definition program. Are you sure you want to keep the dragon life form Onyx? Aria asked playfully as she finished entering the command. You seem capable of reasoning rather well. You could operate as one feigned limited potential and blinked up at Aria. Her stance was nonetheless alert, prepared to respond to a potential emergency. That she could do. Sense, identify, danger, combat, protect. She was good at that. And that was all she was about to aspire to. Blinking blankly, Aria chided Onyx, then turned back to the control board. Circumference scanner. Record phenomena for future location. Session vector, sensor vector. Relative location. Nearest mass. Degrees. Aria was recording the information necessary to relocate the phenomena for future investigation when she noticed the ship had not resumed its original course. Bios, she thought disdainfully. Contraptions, she mumbled, and repeated the resume original destination. Okay. Vector command. She reminded herself that mechanics were necessary if she was going to operate along the course she had chosen. Manifestation and interaction of fun. It was, she thought, after all, enjoyable, propelling particles through space, feeling motion, even having space and distance and forms and interactions as such. The ship did not change course. Onyx sat prepared at full alert. System bypass, manual direct, vector charge, They were still hurtling toward light phenomenon. Vector change, Aria repeated. No result. Motion, stop. She tried, then shut down, but no control would respond to her. Home-based transit, vital relay, urgency, vital relay, distress. Instruments and controls were not responding. Even communications were down and the screen began to flash stupidly. No reference, no reference, no reference. Hope we entered a different universe. Oh, have we entered a different universe? Aria speculated on whether they had traversed a different reality with diverse operating laws. She tried computer cross-reference. Scan, manifest mode. No reference, no reference. But this system is programmed with every reality variable conceivable. Aria was puzzled. Scanning the transit mode reading, she determined that they were still regrouping atoms and linking nuclei. Then the transit screen flashed. repulsion. Arya and Onyx felt the inversion occur. We're condensing, Arya said, maintaining her equilibrium. We're not relocating along the vector path anymore. We're shut down and actually moving as a unit through space. Arya slammed the energy shut off, but it had no effect. We're being pulled in, Onyx. Arya tried to exteriorize outside of form, to telepath a call for assistance, but she found she could not proceed only so far before running into an extremely strange sensation. We're on the other side. We've penetrated a screen of some sort. Concentrating her perception, Arya recognized one of the frequencies and wondered if they had happened onto an Abari vortex. The vector was similar to that of the rent and emotion network, where Abaris drifted in to be charged up with emotion particles. Entire spectrums were available to rent. After being bombarded with and adhered to energy flows, light beings identified themselves by the acquired temporary wavelength. I am cheerful. I am angry. I am sad. This frequency was familiar, but it did not explain the system non-function in the ship and the fact that the Loryad was not responding to her command. They were moving slowly now. Vibrations began to transmit through the walls of the Loryad. Sounds unlike any that Arya had ever perceived. A musical plaint, so beautiful it hurt. But how could beauty hurt? A sadness, a crying wind that wailed of loss and promise simultaneously. An ancient sound, as though the wind had been blowing through galaxies lost and forgotten for millions of spirals, penetrated the ship like so many fingers, beseeching to convey that they knew, to convey what they knew. It grew in layers, undulating on the softest current of tones, which sounded like many voices united in a whispering lament. Outside the Loryad, colors billowed with which left no distance for perception. How could that be? They were protons, Arya knew, but they filled the senses, then seemed to locate out in distance again. Violets, which thinned to rose, then into veils of pink, which whisked to encircle small orbs of luminescence. Just as Arya refocused to see what the luminous orbs circumscribed, they dissolved and vanished. She found herself wanting to look away, not to listen. The best defense is to see, she reaffirmed, and Onyx's sensing reinforced it. She continued to confront as fully as she could. It took awareness, reminder to keep doing so. The wavelengths were fine, so fascinating, so beautiful, so mysterious. Mystery. The thought rang alarmingly. Mystery. The primary bait to a trap. Onyx had moved close to Arya and stood loyally at her side, but her attention was being absorbed by the environment, soaked up by the scintillating sponge which encased them. Onyx, Arya commanded. Mystery. Do not stick to the incomprehensible. Onyx flared, sending blue heat through her nostrils. and the susceptible entrancement in her eyes forged into challenge. She stood ready for anything. Arya, in complete nowness, was receiving not only in one direction, but also in total circumference around her. Abruptly, the sweet wailing gave way to silence. It caused a vacuum. The colors that billowed and swirled in the atmosphere suddenly became more vivid, intense. There was no more luminescent orbs, only pulsations of thick reds and blues, which throbbed to slow and oddly imperative intensity. The Laureate's central control screen flashed, no reference, and intermittently, two-terminal polarity. I don't believe it. It can't be, Arya thought, then quickly caught herself. If it is, she corrected herself. She reminded herself that the era when anti-life did not exist was over. Life had been contaminated. Therefore, anything could be included, including that which made no sense and consequently seemed incredible. I have to perceive and believe whatever is there, Arya braced herself, still hoping this wasn't what she saw, which she now suspected. The colors became increasingly thinner until they finally subsided, revealing a sleek platform ahead. Above this platform, floating in stark majesty, rose a spectacular archway, gold and intricately decorated with florid design. It was awesome, dazzling, and festooned with a magnificent, vast, and glimmering structure of cascading crystal. The Laureate hypnotically coasted onto the surface. What followed happened at nth speed. The split moment that the craft made contact, it thrust forward faster than the speed of time into a tunnel. An envelope of blackness swallowed them ever faster into an end which they could not see. Any comments?
Well, I just feel that he's writing and it's the future.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a past. I think it's the future. And she's just going out there, is what I'm sensing.
I hadn't thought about it that way, but you might be right. We'll see.
Well,
Any-
one thing I want to say about the author, Vanna Bonta.
Bonta, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, she's she's a fantastic science fiction writer. And I looked at the back, just kind of glossed over it and saw that she was writer for Star Trek Next Generation.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
So, it's kind of it's kind of interesting to kind of find out, what her academic studies were. It had to be on quantum physics. And that she chose to be so creative in her writings with those studies. I think that she's a really interesting person. And most of the times when we think of science and science fiction, we always think of masculinity. And maybe that's why her author, the protagonist, what's his name, Mendel?
Yeah.
maybe that's why her author, the author in her book is masculine as opposed to having a feminine author. You know, because I know she has to work around a bunch of dudes all the time, and I think that it would be maybe easier for sales, let's just put that, the author, the protagonist would be a man. Although the main character, which is excuse me, Aria,
Mhm.
she is, when she expresses, that part about Aria, you can tell how much how much of her scientific knowledge has gone into just being within different dimensions, and how
Mhm.
she speaks about wormholes, and how she talks about, different veils, and, things that are odd for, things that are more advanced than what she's realizing, although she's, an advanced being herself. So I really like this author. I think that she's really good, and I see that this book was written in 1995, or
Yeah,
copywritten in 1995.
yeah.
So
I think I read somewhere, I don't remember now whether it was in somewhere in the review of the book or what, but I think this was her first work of fiction.
her first novel,
Yeah,
because she wrote for Star Trek.
right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's all fiction.
yeah.
Yeah, but she was a screenwriter
The
first.
screenwriter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it says 3 poetry collections, short fiction, and screenplays, including television Star Trek: The Next Generation, as well as a 6-year running column in the Midwestern newspaper, The American Citizen.
right, yeah.
Yeah, so, and I didn't read the first, the front flap. I'm just reading the back flap
The
where it's
back,
about the
okay.
author. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, because the first page in the paperback book, there are a bunch of comments or reviews by others. And the one that I found the most fascinating was the one that was written by a teacher of learning disabled. Well, I guess, yeah, she's an educator learning disability specialist. Flight
Mhm.
offers a world in which all the offspring of fear, lack, pain, limitation, addiction, and darkness are reborn into healing glory of the light of the light. It allows my students to see the world as it truly is, a safe place to share their brilliance. In fact, it teaches that the world needs their brilliance. This eloquent story is a priceless learning tool. And to me, that just struck me,
Mhm. Yeah. So I think that, she's smart where she needs to be smart, to make the protagonist, the writer of the science fiction book, masculine, because she just came from that world. And I
Mhm.
think that it probably was a whole lot easier for her uh to sell the story that way, and have the main character feminine, but the main character is so vibrant. Aria is so vibrant, and so and such an inspirational character, because you can see how she can see, in, like she says, she likes being a tracker, whatever
Mhm.
that is. I still don't know what a tracker is yet. It's just seems like
Is
it's
it,
a person
is it
who can,
defined in the glossary?
oh, I didn't even look that up.
Are you saying tracker?
Yeah, tracker,
That
yes.
she's a tracker?
yeah, that she can track. I know it seems that, you know, what a tracker is, that she can track memory, bring them
okay.
into true light. Oh, you found it in the glossary?
Yeah, tracking, running memory facsimile strips of experiences and adventures, and projecting them so they are visible to others, done primarily for entertainment. And that's what happened, because when she talked
Mhm.
about being a tracker, it actually explained it, explained it in the
Yeah.
text, where she talked about how it was projected on the screen for all those individuals in the tribunal to see.
Mhm. And it was
Yeah.
something that she enjoyed doing it, and that she was better at doing it than everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know,
Even
that
though
shows that,
even though you get the impression that she's a neophyte.
right, exactly, yeah, because she said that she didn't have as much experience as everybody else in the tribunal, but she is, you know, she enjoys doing something that is better, that she does better than anybody else. And I think that, you know, just showing that that female empowerment that we have as women, that, you know, we are right in sync along with men in everything that they do, you know, but still but still, you know, that patriarchal society kind of, you know, needs to be the lead guy still, you know. So I think that that's why Mendel is the lead guy. The writer of the story is a man, so that, you know, we could still so especially since it was 1995, you know,
Right.
that, you know, so
Yeah.
that, you know, that they could be appeased so that she didn't have to, so that the main character could be the most influential to me in, you know, throughout the book.
Mhm. Mhm. Second,
Yeah. Oh, I'm agreeing, um, you know, that back in 1995, yes, men, you know, kind of, you know, were the leaders, and we kind of, you know, it's like we came up with the ideas, but they took credit,
exactly.
you know, so,
And it's
um,
been that way all along.
well, yeah, but if you go back far enough, women
They
at
have
one
they
point,
they have been very influential, but like you said, the men have been the ones that get the credit.
yeah, unless you were in the Native American Society, because the women in the Native American Society, they chose the leaders, the chiefs, and all of that. They were more of a matriarchal society as opposed to patriarchal.
Right.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, times are
Mhm.
changing, and that's why I think she's a future, you know, a future being, and she's sharing her journey, and it's into the future, I feel.
Mhm.
Mhm. Okay. You ready to
And I think,
move on?
yeah,
Now,
yeah,
chapter 4 is Bendel. And I kind of think that I think when the writer shows, or when Vanna shows it's Mendel and not his writing, that he's thinking over what he's going to do with his novel in the next stage. I just have that feeling.
Yeah,
mhm,
he's in his time.
Right,
yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, chapter 4. Laptor was nervous. The feeling of being caught was too much for him. He finally decided to risk Juristic's disapproval and timidly waved his hand to announce he was about to say something. Your your supremeness, most brilliant, Laptor began. I consider it best not to jeopardize the future, your complete success, by momentary amusement. Your reason for impressive Your reason is impressive, Luptor, Jurassic bellowed. Quite a display of ethics. He was having a grand time behind Section A, controls of Z-Zone, when, without warning, his face turned umbragious, and he barked. But there is no chance of error. Not to disagree with you, great juristic. Luptor continued his proposal timidly. His insides all aflutter. Not to imply that you would err, but won't the emissions project beyond the reality screen which hide the station? Luptor tightened in apprehension of Juristic's reply. A laugh heaved forward from Juristic's massive body and broke up the cadaver deposits in his throat. But of course, Juristic intermixed in his laugh call. That's the point, he muttered in a conclusion and wiped his mouth. It might attract curiosity. When he spoke next, his voice was suddenly harnessed. He spoke as though he were serving the sound cymbals on a platter. I guarantee you, Luptor, anyone who sees it wins. Juristic crouched over the Z-Zone instruments, busily engrossed with them as he spoke. The prize will be divine sleep. Before they have a chance to struggle any longer with curse of knowing, they will be delivered, completely delivered. In fact, his voice was quivering in a quasi-whisper now. In fact, he crescendoed, we have one. He rubbed his damp palms together and eyebrows arched maximally, looked over at Luptor. Let's welcome them directly to Z-Zone. Bypass level 1 and 2. What do you say? Luptor was proud to be consulted. He relaxed some. Seeing Juristic in such a buoyant state, Juristic rarely overflowed his grand exuberance in this manner. Yes, Luptor agreed quickly. Directly to Z-Zone. Juristic was already maneuvering the arrivals reception through level 1 and 2 via conveyor, craft and all. This life being was by preparing reception and would arrive directly at Z-Zone. Let's pulsate them and with euphoristic though. Juristic was saying, his pudgy fingers busy over the Z-board. Let us see how many. He leaned back, waited for the life sensor to produce the information. 2. Oh, all right, 2. Let's take a look. Not a large ship. When the gray snow on the visual screen crystallized into image, even Juristic was stunned by fear more than anything else, though he would not admit this, especially not to himself. Luptor felt his entireness wretched by a more unadmittable reaction. He dismissed it to himself as false sympathy, the trap, his own trap of deceptive sentimentality, his inability to conceive the great grand order. It was Jurassic who broke the silence. He spoke. It was more of a gasp, actually, and turned into a low, rasping mutter at the name they both knew stuck in his throat. Aria Light. their attention affixed to the screen. The Laureate, still paralyzed, was being transported via conveyor. It was passing level 2 of station 15. From its portal, its commander's attention was temporarily diverted from her plight and directed dolorously to the beings she witnessed. Amnesiac,
Amnesiacs.
Thank you.
See, some words I can read and sometimes some of my
Thank you. Say it for me.
Amnesiacs.
Deluded, dying in solidarity. They were living as complete effects as slaves to programs and other influences. Wake up! Arya thought reached to them. In protest, she came to their defense. Remember who you are. She tried to uplift them, but they could not hear her sound symbols through the glass plates. They were petrified beyond being even remotely aware of her thought convey. Some turned to watch the craft's conveyor ascend up the transparent tunnel. They pointed and smiled and waved as though at a celebratory parade. Suddenly, sound piped into the ship's chamber, and Arya could hear them. Prepared slogans which were not their own thought, none of which matched their eyes, issued from their body forms. How's it going? What's up? Yo, babe. Again, Arya tried to expand beyond her form and outside the ship to pervade the area. But again, she could not proceed past a certain stage of exteriorizing without hitting that particular sensation, and she was unable to proceed past it. Now it was more intense. Pain. Arya cringed back, startled. The ship continued on the conveyor into a tunnel. Lights suddenly flashed and pulsated, and current crackled with increasing volume. The atmosphere was zinging and highly charged, and Arya's attention again tuned to the urgency of the situation in which she found herself. Then the announcement, a detached voice, floated into the cabin. Welcome, and thank you for volunteering. You are reaching Z-Zone. She felt a rays penetrate the ship and knew they were being observed. Funneling her sound symbols onto the rays for audio pickup, Arya stood at formal present and heralded Libraverus Laureate. She repeated it in the 7th vernacular and introduced herself. Truth, freedom for the galaxy. This is the Laureate. I am Arya Flight. Here with scant sensor mate Onyx. Please identify your source. Fine subparticles began to snow through the cabin. They were highly agitated and moved in tight circular patterns as the wavelengths pervaded her. A feeling of euphoric rapture came over Arya. Onyx was moving her head back and forth the way she did when something pleased her tremendously. Arya struggled to perceive beyond the fabricated emotion. It's synthetic, Onyx. Please confront. Hearing Arya's command, Onyx mustered her will against the effect. Artificially induced, Arya kept it under identification, operating through it, keeping her own sense about her. She prepared to emanate for assistance again. This time with resolution not to pull back when she hit against the pain field. She expanded, hit the familiar point, and tried to go beyond it. Her entirety was wrecked with electricity, with extreme grid sensations of heat and cold, until finally she evaluated she could not continue to hold the position without severe damage and withdrew. Aria grappled with what to do next. The Laureate, her very ship, had been yanked somehow from her control and was completely in the grasp of some strangeness. She could not abandon it, nor Onyx, nor her purpose and agreement. Evacuating the existence was not an option. Welcome, and thank you for volunteering. You are reaching Z-Zone. We have not volunteered, Aria communicated. There has been an error. Welcome, and thank you for volunteering. You are reaching Z-Zone. We have not volunteered, she repeated, and was interrupted once more by the announcement, welcome, and thank you for your volunteering. You are reaching Z-Zone. We have not volunteered, Aria yelled back, with such force that it shook Onyx into complete nowness. The ferocity of her fury surprised herself. She had not felt it in Spiral. Then she knew with all the certainty her vastness possessed. The facts lined up. Overwhelm of individual perception, enforced reality, two-terminal polarity. Only malintent and injustice caused her such white rage. This is a station of the dark regime. The tribunal had known of one, Station 15, which was still in operation. Supposedly, it was only recycling beings who had already subscribed. Entrapments and involuntary administration were supposedly no longer active. It was the tribunal's plan to salvage those lives after they freed adjoining sectors. First, they planned to help and reward those who had at least tried to fly the conquest by remaining true to principal nature. After restoring and rehabilitating the power to those sectors, they kept Aberries who had programmed themselves to recycle hypnotically in the perpetual downgrade. Eventually, truth bearers would even help the ones who had been imprisoned into matter on the outskirt planetary system. Station 15 was not supposed to be anywhere near her vector core. Aria pondered as she reviewed the series of events that had led to that point. It must have been that light phenomenon. It was bait, a string from a dimension warp that suctioned space fabric when contacted. An entire portion of space must have been relocated, traveling time spiral in an instant. Aria summoned all she had ever learned about the dark regime. She needed to do just the right thing. There was no grace room for error. If she didn't, the consequences were the closest thing to death for a thought being. It was death without dying. Aria flight was a one of great magnitude, aligned with the eternal nature principle in all its power. She recalled the history of others who had become targets. They were the very ones her missions were recovering. The ones of magnitude had been trapped. Forcefully, she robbed of the knowledge of their very self. This was loss of soul. Through force, the scene of who they really were was simply obliterated from their awareness. The conquest went after those who doze, who doge, or daod. With these under control, it was much easier to capture the thought beings of lesser magnitudes. They would have no light beings, no supreme beings as allies. Arya struggled to overcome the amazement that this could still be an act of danger. The consequence rather, of an innocent solution was almost unconfrontable. She didn't want to confront it, but she had to. It meant her life or death. Death through unconsciousness, through forgetting. This is how life died. She knew and shivered against the contact of condensed beings who had once created and daod, now silent and unable to create, no longer cause, but only consequence, entombed in solid, stark conglomerates of mass and electrical facsimile. In a matter of factors, she too could be robbed of herself. What did a being have if not oneself? She would have no recourse. She wouldn't remember. How will you explain it to her, juristic leptor credit? There's nothing to explain. Surely you don't. She is of the tribunal. You don't intend to. The extractor steadfastly vacuumed the land Laryard toward phase 1, the zone. Arya wished she had done the archaic condition prevention training. Stay in nowness. Stay to truth. Onyx sensed. What is the solution? What is it? The information data had not initial had the information data had been not initial priority since the stations were believed and disbanded. It had been spirals and spirals ago. Avidly observing all occurrences taking place, Arya carefully coordinated her every perception with past knowledge in order to reach an undoing of the situation. Then she saw him through the portal as the Laryard had emerged from the tunnel. He was standing behind a clear petition. Laryard came to a halt at its unpiloted destination. Juristic, Arya cried in relief, jumping through the MD backstation panels as they slid apart. You sensed my call. Onyx's eyes crimsoned. In one swoop, she positioned herself in front of Arya and stood ready to fight. Her wings stretched to full expanse like two transient sails, every gossamer rigid. She hissed fire, and her star-tipped tail threatened impalement. Onyx is juristic. And Leptor, Arya heard her assurance, but simultaneously felt doubt. Onyx was no longer stunned by her synthetic bliss. She was accurately perceiving some danger. Not juristic, Arya began to think, then chuckled, the habit. If it is, it is. Confront it. She did so. Pushing away her suspicion, discarding her biased fear, and even hope, Arya looked first at Juristic, then at Luptor. Their gazes met and hung in stalemate. Arya pervaded Onyx. The censor mate was intently focused on Juristic and Luptor, prepared to turn them into targets if necessary. Should they approach as threat or danger, they would not be exempt from Onyx's white fire, waiting for her cue. Onyx was suddenly gone. Arya leaned forward and off the Lariat's debarkation platform where she and Onyx had been standing. She penetrated Juristic's gaze in protest, shattering the seal of ineligibility, extricating him so hard with her will that he felt demand for an explanation sting to his face. She scrutinized him. He was doing nothing to assist her. Anger began to rise in Arya. It burst against the restraint she exercised. She considered bow slapping Juristic, but did not want to vindicate only a personal issue. What would that attain? She must display only what would attain her desired end. She had to find honor and get out of this. Is this even
Well,
Juristic?
this is, it's 8:30.
Okay,
Did you want to, I mean, if you feel this is a good place to stop, or did you want to read on some more, or, because we do
We
have a
can-
couple more pages.
yeah, you got about 3 more pages. Why don't we stop here and pick it up at this point the next time?
Okay, because we got to find out what happened to Onyx.
Yes,
Yeah.
disappeared on her.
So this is what my thoughts are. Okay, so whatever's going on with area flight
Mm-hmm,
is real. That's in a real dimension. I
mm-hmm,
think the man, Mendel, is tapping into who Arya is,
right,
because
right,
everything he had just written down now is actually happening in that in wherever they are. I can't remember where they are. But
yeah,
anyway, wherever the tribunal is.
right, yeah,
Yeah. So
because I think right now what he's doing, he's just he's thinking over what he has written and what he and how he's going to go on with what he's already written.
oh, see, I see it different. I see that he's tapping into real life that's happening somewhere on another planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Not that
and
he's thinking it,
yeah,
that he's tapping into her life.
right, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. He's going over it in his mind right now before he continues to write, because what I'm seeing is him, considering what he's already written and how he's going to go on with the story.
See, I see it similar to what Penelope is saying, that as a writer, he's going into himself and asking for inspiration.
Okay.
And Arya, although he sees her as a fictional character,
Mhm.
she is the inspiration that he's seeking inspiration, like, okay, what do I want to write next? He's thinking that, but then she pops in and is giving him the information.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to what's happening in her real life. So,
Right.
Yeah.
so
And
yeah,
he thinks it's fictional, what he's writing, thinking it's coming from his mind,
Mhm.
but it's actually coming from Arya.
yeah,
But
it's
he's
her story.
putting it down.
Mhm.
Yeah, he's putting it down. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of how I'm kind of seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, I'm sure each of you has at one time or another just been doing something and then you think, okay, now what do I want to do? How do I want to do this? Or what am I going to do next? And all of a sudden it comes in and it's really not you thinking it, it just sort of pops in. And you wonder
Right.
sometimes, gee, where the hell did this come from? You know,
Mm-hmm.
or how did I get this idea?
Been there,
I
done that.
know in teaching, when I'm choreographing, I'll hear a song, and sometimes I'll hear the song as I'm driving, and it's so the idea coming is so strong. I'll pull over the side of the road, and I know it's not my idea. You know, I'm the one writing it, and I'm the one hearing it or becoming aware of it, but it's coming from somewhere out in the
Divine,
universe.
divine
You know,
source. Yeah.
coming to me, because sometimes the steps that come I would never even have thought of, you know, or it's like,
Mhm.
well, now how do I go about doing this, you know, and that type of thing. So that's how I'm seeing, you know, what Mendel's writing.
Mhm.
You know, he
Mhm.
sort of started out with this idea to write this book and these characters, but now she's like, you know, he's tapped into her and her life.
Mhm. And I think it's kind of interesting that the tribunal is part of the dark regime, something that that she didn't realize. And you know, what are they up to? You know, are they stealing souls? You know, because
Right.
you know
And
they're asking her. You know, they say welcome. You know, thank you for volunteering. She said, I didn't volunteer anything, and she has to say that over and over and over again in order for them to take it serious, so much so that she has to go out of her own character to attack, to you
but
know to you know to stop them from doing whatever it is that, well, not so much to attack, but to defend herself. You know, where her thoughts have to actually, you know, go into a physical reaction. Like she said, she had to slap him, you
mhm.
know, with her thoughts, so that, you know, he could, you know, so that they would stop doing whatever they're doing. And they didn't stop it because I think they stole they stole Onyx. So I don't know what's up with that. So this
Well,
is
we'll find out as we continue. And the
so
story continues.
yeah. So what are your thoughts, Harriet, about what's going on in the story?
At this point, like I said, I kind of see um Mendel.
Mm-hmm.
I see him, you know, mulling over, you know, where am I going to go next with this? And this is kind of an overview of what we've already read. And I see him, but the thing that struck me is when the lanyard or the Loriod landed and they encounter Jurassic, Juristak, and Luptor, she recognizes them, but they don't seem to recognize and acknowledge her. So are they for real or are they not for real? You know, are they imitators or are they the real Jew? And like I said, I'm seeing juristic as possibly the dark side of Mendel.
Mm-hmm. That would be good.
I'm kind of picking. I'm seeing that, but I'm not going to say that that is who he is.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But at this point, I'm just kind of seeing him as that dark side of Mendel.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, they did. I mean, at some point in time, you know, it said it was, go back to page 38. It says it was Jurassic who broke the silence. He spoke. It was more of a gasp, actually, and turned into a low, rasping mutter as the name they both knew stuck in his throat, Aria Flight. So they recognized her
Mm-hmm.
too. So she recognized them and they recognized her too. They knew who she was. You know, because
Mm-hmm.
they, like I said, they both knew the name they both knew stuck in his throat, Aria
Mhm.
Flight.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so they recognize who she is. Um, and I don't know to what extent that her fame is.
Right.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right.
Yeah, we
I
don't
think
know.
I think it would be interesting to as we continue along to kind of compare, how we're seeing each one of these characters. Each of us, how we're seeing
Mm.
these characters, and it's kind of and by the time we get to the end, to probably collectively we're all right in our views,
Mm-hmm.
and at some point in time. Yeah.
Well, I think, well, let's just roundtables are kind of hard with a fictional book, but
Right. Yeah.
but we still get, and I'm still getting something out of it. The main thing that I'm getting out of it is, you know, most of the things that I think about quantum physics, somebody else thinks about that now. Maybe it's because I've watched a lot of science fiction, you know, but the way that she talks about Vanna, the way that Vanna Bonte talks about a light being, and
Mm-hmm.
and I guess her alter ego, which is part of Onyx, where Onyx doesn't have a problem with defending, where Aria, is still part of the Deo, where all is love. So she doesn't see a purpose to have a physical defense,
Right.
you know.
And
So
I think
wait a minute,
that
wait a minute before
okay.
you get, because this is my round
Okay.
table. I would like
Okay.
to
Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
let me
I'm
finish up
sorry.
my round table real quick.
Okay.
So what I'm getting out of this is that the it's easier. So the things that I know I trust in, or I believe, or I see in myself,
Mm-hmm.
it's stuff that I need to just continue, just begin living that, because other people see
Right.
that, other people see that. So I just can begin to live that. So, okay, so go ahead, Harriet.
No, I was going to say, I see Arya as mostly as a spirit, as opposed to a being in a vessel, or a spirit in a vessel, with physicality. Whereas Onyx is a physical entity.
Mm-hmm.
And I see, and what I'm seeing Arya as, and I think it's interesting, AIRA. And if you drop the second A, what's that, air? And maybe I'm just
No, you're not.
but and that's why I'm seeing her as a and what she, to me, I feel I can identify with that aspect of her, that spirit within me, can identify with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. What about
Mhm.
you, Sakina?
Well, what I was seeing is that she's teaching Mendel that the past, the present, and the future coexist simultaneously. And that's why some of his friends are saying he's getting too involved with his characters and he's losing sight of reality. And in one fashion, he may be, but in another fashion, it's because unbeknownst to, I mean, unbeknownst to her reality, she's teaching him from where she's at, inspiring him to write what he needs and wants to write. But it's all intertwining, the past, the present, future. It's all, it's like a dog chasing its tail, it's all coming into manifestation, and at the same time, it's dissolving. In what little I know of quantum physics, it's the whole exists in the part, and the part exists in the whole. And you can look at something and see it, well, like you can look at a chair and see it as a chair, and then again you can look at it and see all the little bits and pieces and parts and molecules that make up that chair. Our vision doesn't go fast enough, but if we put it under a high powerful microscope, we can see that. And so that's how I kind of seen, that she's sort of teaching him that as he's contemplating what he's going to write next. And as he's inspired to write it, he writes it. And as he's reading it, as he's writing it, he's seeing something else.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. So one of
That
the things
makes
that I
any
can,
sense.
yeah, one of the things I can say about this book is, like I said, I like convoluted stories. I do, where, you got 3 and 4 stories that, that coincide, and eventually they come together, and you'll be able to see, oh, okay, yeah, they're not separate stories. This is what this is about. This is a great book. It's a great book, and it does help me understand a little bit more about quantum physics. Well, tomorrow we don't have anything, nothing on Friday. Saturday we will be working with a Gospel of Thomas, and and Sunday, of course, Gospel of Thomas is 2 to 4. Sunday we're going to be doing journal group, and that's also from 2 to 4. So, and that's it for this week. And if, like I said, if anybody has any thoughts or things that, we do have a couple of open Saturdays. I think it's 2 open Saturdays. I think we have in August. So we can, if anyone is thinking of anything that we are doing or they would like to do, just let me know, and we can include that in.
I won't be available next Thursday to next Monday because I'm going to be out of town.
Okay.
Let you know.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thanks for letting us know. Yeah, so super cool. So yep, so that's pretty much it. So would anyone like to close us out in prayer?
I can.
Okay, thank you.
As we take a few deep breaths, we ask the divine source for the awareness that we have been given to be thankful and grateful for all of the blessings that we have received by just knowing each other and by sharing and by just being the light and love that we were created to be. We give thanks for this day and for the fellowship and friendship that is evolving in each and every one of us. And on that note, we say, let it be, and it is so.
So it is.
And
Okay,
so it
thank you,
is.
everybody. Love you all. See you
Love
soon.
you. Bye all.
Bye.
Bye.
Night, night.